back, everyone, to Close to Broke. My name is Kieran, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you folks here. Today's episode is an absolute blast. Unfortunately, there's no intro, as I was so caught up in filming B-roll that I forgot that you need to start an episode off with, like, this part and stuff. But not to bore you guys, there's a lot of regular stuff that we're going to be talking about. As you guys know, the entire month of October, we're going to be giving away all the funds we make from our YouTube ad revenue to someone that's in need, whether that's a donation as in form of charity or something else more personal. We are definitely going to be looking into it. Beyond that, I hope you guys have a lovely day. If you guys haven't had a chance already, make sure to check out the link in the top description if you guys ever want to play with me on the Splash Squads. If you weren't able to make the meetup game, which was an absolute blast, I'm super happy for everyone that came out. This is your chance and your way to play with me if you're not in, where are we at? California? We're in Southern California. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. It's an absolute madhouse. And today is the first session in a long time. I feel like I got my mojo back. Trust me, this session is awesome. Click the like button. Let's get into today's episode. So moving forward, we're going to be doing something called an organized or a private game. It'll be hosted live at the bike in their private room, which is called the Legends Room. There's no specific dates, there's no specific times. It'll vary depending on people's schedules. But the point is, it's going to be a one table, $2, $5, $10, 3-blind game. We want to make something that's similar to Max Payne Monday. We're just trying to put on a fun game. So if that's something that interests you, let me know. All you have to do is DM me in Instagram. Welcome back to Close to Broke, and this episode is a really important one for a couple of reasons. I think the main one being today is the first episode we really dive deep into this live tell stuff that I've been working on. No one's teaching me anything. I'm just kind of doing my best to be more cognitive of what the hell my surroundings are. There's a lot of really great examples in this session. I'm super excited to get into it with you. And more importantly, guys, it feels like the mojo's back. Let's hop into the session. In this very first hand, first hand on, there's a $20 blind raise here after the $10 straddle. We find ourselves under the double straddle. The gentleman to my left is trying to raise, but I want to, get him out of the pot. Let's get out of here. So I raise a little bit larger to $65. Folds all the way over to the player in the big blind who decides to jam here for $270. 13 and a half big blinds, whatever the heck it is. Never going to be folding a hand this strong. We go ahead and make the call. He shows over a queen 10 of diamonds. We're in massive favorite to get ourselves in the right trek. Off the start, and nope. 10 high flop. Unfortunate to get things going off on the wrong foot, but I don't often lose the very first hand of the session, make a massive win. But let's see if we can't battle back. Okay, so hear me out. Ace Queen might have hurt me and stabbed me in the heart in the last hand, but hopefully in this one, that's not the case. As yet again, we find ourselves with Ace Queen of Diamonds here. I find myself in late position, decide to raise here to $30 as the straddle is on for the entirety of this session. The small blind is the only caller, and we're going off to a flop that is beautiful as it comes Ace King 3 Rainbow. With the action checked over to me, I can go a couple of different ways here, but I think the most important thing to do here is probably bet. The question now becomes sizing. I do have the nut advantage for sure on this board. I'm going to have all the aces and all the kings. Just because I do block an ace doesn't mean that it's non-existent. I decided to bet a little bit on the larger side. I don't love my sizing here on the flop, but it's just kind of what I do. As you guys can see, I'm moving my setup from seat 4 to seat 3. So with all of that mumbo and jumbo going on, I just throw out a c-bet of $50. Our opponent ends up making the call, and we're going off to an outstanding turn card that comes as 6 of diamonds. If somehow we were behind, which doesn't feel very likely, we at least get even more equity. When the opponent checks over to me again, I think this is where I misplay the hand a tad bit. I think in time, I'm thinking that my opponent's just never going to be folding an ace on a board this dry, which granted, I think it's fair to say in these stakes, people are just not in love with making folds. I make a bet of $100. My main goal here at the end of the day is to just get as much money in the middle as possible. Anyways, after quite a bit of thinking, my opponent ends up folding. Like I said, with a massive stranglehold on the hand that I did have, I think checking and allowing my opponent to continue with a bluff on the river to follow through with that. It's just, there's probably not a single river card that I'm scared of. So either way, we'll chalk it up there and looking forward to continuing to progress in the session. Things seem to be going along fairly well so far. Sure, we lost the first hand, but for the rest of the session, it feels like I've had a pretty good hold on my table dynamics. In this very next hand, early position decides to limp here. The small blind limps. I find myself in the big blind with ace-7 offsuit. Probably plays okay as an isolation here. Probably plays better than going 4 or 5 ways to a flop, but I end up just calling here as straddle checks the option. We're going too many ways to a flop that comes king, six, deuce, all spades. You may be asking, how the hell is this hand even going to be in the vlog? Just wait. The action ends up checking through, and somehow we add some equity on the turn by improving to a pair. Turn card comes a 7 of clubs, and at this point, the small blind decides to lead out for a bet of $30. So I think I don't want to put too much info into this specific bet. At this point, I'll just make the call. I'm still ahead of a bunch of random draws, obviously. We're going off to a river card that comes a 7 of spades after everyone else folds. This now becomes an interesting development. We've backed our way into trips here, and when the opponent decides to check to us, we're kind of in a bit of a predicament. Do I think that my opponent can ever have a king here, like king 10, king queen, king jack, king 9? Holdings obviously exist. Now the question becomes, can I ever get value from a hand inferior than a flush? Because we beat all of those hands, right? I go into the little bit of a mini tank and I decide that, hey, there's a small chance that I can go for thin value here and get called off by an inferior holding. I decided to throw out a little bit of a blocker-ish min-thin merge bet. It's kind of hard to call with a really, really small baby flush, and there's still a chance that we can get called by worse. After a brief second, like literally 2 seconds, our opponent throws in the call. I announce trips, and he does show 10-8 of spades. Played it well on his part there. I don't honestly mind going for the merge play. Like I said, I can pretty confidently say that I don't think an opponent with a really small flush would be calling the river. Let's say he has a king 5 with a 5 of spades or something like that. Less likely for it to happen, but who knows? Either way, moving along. Well, just after thinking I had a pretty good understanding of the table dynamics, seems like that went out the window. In its following hand, a young fan of the vlog who's a very solid young player decides to open at $35. Shout out to you, Sam. He was a pleasure to have at the table. The cutoff decides to call. I find myself in the button, and I swear to you, I have like a little bit of a mini flashback. I feel like Garrett Adelstein here, calling on the button with pretty much any 2 suited cards seems like reasonable, and I think I can get away with some funky stuff post-flop. So I end up making the call here. The small blind, the big blind, and the straddle all make the call. We're going way, way, way too many ways to a flop. That is horrible. Queen 10-5 with the rainbow suited variety. The action starts checking one by one by one until eventually the action is now on me. I think a lot of poker has been going on where I feel like I haven't had my confidence and understanding or a good grasp of the table dynamics here. And I think betting here, honestly in position, it actually makes some sense here. It's a little funky that in this specific instance, I have 6-3 of diamonds, but hey, we're 3/5 of a way to a straight flush. I decided to throw out a bet. I understand that it might take several bullets to unload this clip all the way. I decided to bet $100 here, and the action ends up folding and folding and folding until lastly, it ends up folding through. So small hand here, but I thought I'd add it. Again, I think this is a clear-cut play. Whether it's good or bad is not really what I'm getting at. Having a spot so clearly unfold in front of you and actually following through with the play is something that I've been having trouble doing. So there we go. We'll take a W, even if it's 6 high. We'll take it. Wait, before we get going, I want to ask you guys for a massive favor. Please make sure to click the like button down below. It goes such a far way in helping our community grow. I realized during this very interesting month, there's been a lot developing in poker and not much of it revolving around the poker vlogging sphere. It would mean so much to me if you'd take the time by leaving the like, a comment, and a subscription. Anyways, back to the hand here. I decided to isolate a $50 with ace king. The action ends up folding all the way to my player here in the under the gun limping situation. He decides to throw in the call, and we're going off to a flop that comes 5-4-7 rainbow. With the action checked over to me, I think I can go one of 2 ways. C-betting here is not the worst thing in the world, but it's very hard for us to have the nuts on this board. But the other big thing that I think is important to mention is that checking here seems like a good idea. I'm going to protect myself by having some overpairs here, so I end up just checking. The turn card comes a deuce of hearts. We pick up a gut shot, and we also have the ace of hearts. So my opponent throws out a bet of $90. This is a really big bet, a ridiculously sized bet, but as we talked about earlier, against recreationals, I've been having a pretty reasonable time reading these things. From the little bit of the live reads that I'm getting here, I feel a ton of weakness from this player, and this bet and this bet sizing feels indicative of it. I now see what these little things mean. At this point, I think ace high can be good at some frequency, and if a heart comes on the river, I think I can blast my opponent off of a really weak middling pair, and we'll see what happens when we get there. I end up making the hero call here, and we're going off to a river card that comes a 5 of clubs. Before anything else happens, before we go to the rest of the hand, check this out. I have a really good read on my opponent at this specific juncture on the river. The way he's kind of handling his chips, I feel a very genuine form of indecisiveness. And when that happens, I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. No matter what my opponent does, I'm looking straight at him, specifically his hands and the way he's manipulating the chips. I feel confident with my read here that I for sure have the best hand. Albeit, it sucks. This is not a fun board, but with the board pairing here on the river, it's just very unlikely that my opponent as a recreational is going to be going for thin value. He ends up deciding to check it over to me. I have a really easy check back. I show my hand, and it is, in fact, good. Props to my opponent for even taking the line and considering bluffing there. Like I talk about all the time, I don't feel like people are bluffing often enough. But in this case, he ran into the one person that was a donkey enough to call. But either way, massive props to him for almost pulling the trigger. And he would later on ask me, damn it, I almost bet. And I did reassure him that if he's ever watched one of my vlogs, I am not someone that's foreign to making some really light river calls. So let's keep this train on the rails. This next hand, early position decides to limp here, and a stronger player from the cutoff, Sam, decides to isolate here to $50. With the action on me here in the small blind, we look down at ace-3 offsuit. These wheel hands, specifically the shooter variety, play really great as isolating plays, 3-betting or isolating from the blinds. But in this instance, it's not suited, but that's not going to stop me from finding a way to push as much EV in my direction as possible. Have shown that I've really shown down with a bunch of premiums on rivers so far. I'm doing my best to try to keep things nip and tuck and take advantage of my image, which at the table currently looks like, I think in my opinion, pretty solid and playing a really reasonable range. I decided to throw in a 3-bet here for $160. Honestly, we can even go a little bigger. 200 might be a little better. We're all paying about $1,000 effective. Although putting 20% of your stack is scary, the action ends up folding back to the initial 3-better or the initial raiser isolator. And after a bit of tanking, our opponent ends up letting his hand go. Phew. Happy to get that one through. Shout out to Sam. Took it like a champ. Let's keep this train going. Just a few hands later, in this next spot, Hijack decides to limp here. I'm the cutoff with ace-king offsuit, and I decide to isolate to $50. In position, you can sometimes go smaller, but to be quite honest, as I talk about a lot, specifically in this Hustler 5-5-10 game, people are just so limp call happy. You've got to really penalize them by going larger. Out of nowhere, a younger gentleman decides to throw in a 3-bet to $150 from the button. The action ends up folding back to me, and I think this is the first massive mishap that I've played in the entire session. I miscount his stack, and I only think that he has somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 behind, and I decide to just throw in the jam. The problem with this is that it's kind of a massive blunder. Putting in, even though it's only 100 big blinds, with a hand as strong as ace-king is just kind of stupid. One, because it's really hard to get called by significantly worse. I doubt that ace-queen is going to snap me off. Even jacks or tens or maybe ace, whatever, queens has to think about it for a second. 4-betting specifically here to somewhere in the neighborhood of like 420 or 400 makes more sense. The problem in real time was that I was thinking that we're playing $1,000 effective. If I make it 400, he ends up calling. We have $600 left, and there's 1,000 in the pot. If I miss, it's unfortunate. But either way, our opponent ends up folding to our jam. He ended up having more than $500 as I didn't see the white chips in his left hand. But either way, you've got to live and learn. I realize that I've got to be a little more conscious of that. I'm picking up all these live tells, but I can't even see the gosh darn chips in these people's hands. So either way, happy with the outcome. Like they say, ace-king's only a drawing hand, and we didn't have to see a flop, so we'll take $200 blind. Alrighty, this hand in itself has almost an entire essay worth of notes to go over, so buckle up. This might be a long one, but it's the entire reason you guys clicked on today's episode. I've been really conscious of what's going on at the table, and in this next hand, it's a good example, as I'm in the straddle, and as opposed to fidgeting with my phone, or changing the song, or raising the volume, or looking around the room, I make the very obvious effort to look at everyone as they peel their cards here. The action folds over to a middle position player who seems to have some real indecisiveness on whether to limp or raise here. He ends up deciding on raising to $30. The action folds to the big blind who calls, and before I even look at my hand, I think that this would be a really fun spot to squeeze. So I tell myself if it's good enough to squeeze or even close in the ballpark, I want to do it. Because I feel genuinely that my opponent from the middle position is weak, I decided 3-bet to $130. With the action going back over to our opponent, doesn't seem like he has any pause or worry about what just happened, and he doesn't even seem to have a decision to make a 4-bet. So if that's the case, I think we can comfortably rule out aces, ace-king, kings, and queens, and kind of play from there. Either way, the big blind decides to fold. We're going heads up to a flop that's pretty awful. The flop comes jack 3 deuce with 2 clubs and a heart. Not a lot going for us in this spot. Like literally not like nothing, actually, to be quite fair. But it's never stopped me before. I have a read and I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. I decided to bet $75. A down bet is solid here because I think on a board texture this dry with its jack high, it makes sense for me to go smaller. And my opponent does something that's really interesting. Without much thought, it seems like he just doesn't believe me. Throws out a raise to $225. The problem with this raise here is that I just don't see a ton of value. One, queens, kings, and aces, I think we can all agree, at least consider raising. Not that they would. I think a lot of people can slow play and do slow play those big pairs. But to not even think about it pre-flop, feels a little fishy. I think he's going to have a ton of random flush draws, and I don't block any of those, and I think he's going to have a ton of random air. I do something very odd, and I decide to float here. No, you might be asking, is my table or my chair vibrating? Is there any kind of random nefarious things going on? There's just not. I have a live read. I'm willing to bet money on it, and I'm going to go with it, whether it's playing the hand optimally or not. That's not what I'm here for. We're going off to a turn card that comes the 8 of diamonds. And now I'm at a crossroads. Either I check or I can do something really stupid and just lead after getting check raised. So after a little bit of thinking, whether it's good or bad, I'm sticking with the read, man. I'm willing to put the money where my mouth is. I'm willing to gamble. I'm willing to put it all, risk my entire stack on this bluff, on this spot, because of how certain I am on this live read. All that being said, I throw out a bet of $350. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense, but I don't think he's making any sense either. Anyways, my opponent does the double check. My heart's beating, but I'm feeling good about myself, and he eventually decides on a fold. Let's freaking go. I'm ecstatic for many reasons. Mostly because I got a live read, I went with it, and it went in my favor. Granted, I played the hand like an absolute moron, but I got the job done. In this final pot of the session, we're catching up to this hand on the flop. This is a bomb pot, $25, 7 players to a flop that comes jack, 9, 10, with 2 diamonds and a spade. Man, when you think of dynamic board textures, a very wet board texture, the definition of that in a dictionary would be accompanied by a picture of this flop. It's just super, super wet. There's a lot going on here. And I look down at a really good hand. 2 pair. Jack 9 here with the action now on me. I decided to take over the betting lead here. I bet out kind of small here. I bet $65. The opponent in the hijack decides to make the call. Everyone else folds, and we're going off to a turn card that comes with 3 of hearts. Shouldn't change much of anything here. I think I can still continue to get value from flush draws and open-ended draws here. The last thing I want to do is check here and allow my opponent to realize equity. I'd like to bet a little bit on the larger size up a bit. So I bet $175. With the action now on my opponent, he does something I was not really expecting. He announces a raise for $450. This is kind of interesting in many ways, and to kind of continue to harp on this live read thing, usually in my findings when people announce their raise size, when they project like that, it feels more of a, I don't know, like weakness to me. They're trying to imply that they're very strong as opposed to just cutting out a raise and putting it out there. It's like the same thing when you see people just throw out chips and just toss them down as they're so strong or whatever. I decided just make the call here. I think anything else would be a massive over or just ridiculous play. I make the call, and we're going off to the river with tons and tons of money in the middle. That comes a jack. And it's so funny because I'm thinking jack, 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 jack. Oh my goodness, that is a jack of clubs. With the action on me now, my initial jerk reaction is to just throw it in there, jam all in, get the money in the middle. And I realize there is 2 things going on here. My opponent has like a brick massive draw, or my opponent has like a boat of some sort, or like that's kind of it. The problem now becomes is that there's significantly more missed draws that my opponent has than made hands. I block the boat. I have like all the jacks almost, and I have half of the 9s. The only other hand that exists is pocket 10s. And maybe I think we get raised by pocket 10s on the flop. I don't think they'd be waiting till the turn. especially being 7 ways on the flop. I just doubt they just smooth call. I end up deciding to make the check here and allow my opponent to bluff at it, because that's what I'm pretty much putting him on with the live read that I got, as well as the understanding of our ranges. Our opponent goes deep into the tank, and I'm just thinking, please jam, please jam, please jam. But after quite a bit of tanking, our opponent decides to check it back. Oh no. I would be told by him that he had a massive draw and that he did in fact have a flush draw as well as an open-ended draw. So we did the right thing here. The only other thing I could have possibly changed is doing something really goofy, like putting a min bet of like $10 on the river, like a block bet, and inducing him to do something ridiculous, because we do that when we have middling pairs, right? I think it'd be a good idea to do it with a boat like this. But either way, I'm really happy with the understanding of the situation. It's hard to get more money from like 9 high or king high or whatever he had, right? So I think we did a pretty doggone good job of trying to get the max. I'm happy we assessed the situation correctly. If I jam, he just snap folds anyways. So either way, we're going to go and take that. Another really solid session here from the Hustler. Super happy with the way everything turned out. A massive shout out to everyone that ended up coming by and saying hello. It's an absolute pleasure meeting all of you folks in person. I hope to see you guys all on October 15th for our meetup game. It's going to be an absolute blast when we get there. Otherwise, it's sort of over to me in person to see how we feel after a solid set. So here we are outside of the Hustler Casino. Obviously this means we have a session to wrap up. Wow. That King 10 hand was quite an interesting one. That full house we had on the river there. It was a really fun session. A lot of people won't like what the hell happened with the King 10, but I don't believe in like holding back knowledge or things that I experience, but I don't know if I do a great job of explaining what I'm seeing. Sometimes you just gotta like be there to see it, if that kind of makes sense. The vibe, the table dynamic. I had a really good live tell, or I was willing to put my stack at risk for it. Sometimes you go with it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you look like an idiot, sometimes you look like a genius. This time around, I look somewhere in the middle. It ended up working and I'll take it. Otherwise, today's game was profitable. Quick session. I think we played for like 3.5 hours or 4 hours. Good day. A green day is a good day for us. Would have been an even better day if we didn't lose the very first hand of the session, Queen 10 versus Ace Queen. But we'll take it every day of the week, baby. Thank you guys so much for continuing to watch and support these videos. It goes such a long way by you guys dropping a like, sharing with friends that maybe have never seen the channel before, and so much more beyond that. Have a wonderful rest of your day, guys. Thank you so much, everyone that watches the videos. It means so much to me. I hope to see you guys at a poker table near you. Otherwise, stay happy, healthy, and more importantly, guys, run great at the tables. Deuces. Oh, what am I talking about? I was in for 2,000 and I was out for just shy of 3K. I think it was 29.98 or 29.94, one of the two. But big win today. We'll take it. 5-5. Bada bing, baby. Let's go.